In the Redet kingdom of Umuaro, life moved like the rhythm of the drum, steady, certain, and full of song. The yam fields stretched wide, green leaves swaying in the harmattan breeze. The river sparkled beneath the morning sun, carrying women's laughter as they washed their clothes. Children chased each other between compounds, their voices rising above the crow of roosters. And at the heart of it all stood the palace of King Omanuko the Just. From the day of his coronation, Omanuko had ruled not as a tyrant, but as a father. He had fought wars and returned with victory. He had opened trade routes with far-off lands, bringing salt, brass, and silk into Umuaro. He had settled disputes with wisdom sharper than a blade. If a thief was caught, Omanuko punished him fairly. If a widow cried, he restored her land. If strangers sought refuge, he gave them food and space to dwell. The people said, "When Omanuko speaks, even the stubborn kola nut splits. When Omanuko judges, truth bows its head. When Omanuko fights, death itself runs to hide." The palace itself mirrored his greatness. Its walls of red mud towered higher than 3 men, painted with woolly patterns, black swirls and triangles that told stories of battles, of harvest, of ancestors. At night, torches blazed along its gates, where warriors stood watch with spears tipped in iron. Inside, the courtyard echoed with the sounds of pestles pounding yam, of flutes played by praise singers, of children racing between the huts of Omanuko's many wives. For Omanuko was blessed with abundance. His barns bulged with yam, his herds of goat and cattle were countless, his wives were many, and his children even more. 7 strong sons he had, each taller than the next, each adorned with coral beads, cowrie anklets, and the confidence of princes. 3 daughters too, graceful as rivers, their laughter like tinkling bells. But of all his riches, none mattered more to him than his people's trust. Every market day, when the talking drum summoned the land to the village square, Omanuko came out beneath the towering idolatry. He sat on the carved stool of his ancestors, staff in hand, leopard skin across his shoulders. Beside him sat his chiefs and elders, while the people crowded close, farmers with hoes still dusty, women with babies on their backs, hunters with quivers slung low. Here he listened. Disputes over land. Complaints of theft. Pleas for marriage blessings. He did not dismiss the poor, nor favor the rich. His judgments fell like rain, nourishing to some, washing away the filth of others. And each time his words rang out, the people answered with cheers. Omanuko the pillar. Omanuko, ram whose horns break stone. Omanuko, leopard that sleeps but never dies. Yet time spares no man. Slowly, Omanuko's shoulders curved like a bow, his beard grew white as cotton, and his voice, though steady, carried the weight of years. He began to think often of death, not with fear, but with duty. Who would inherit his stool when he returned to the ancestors? Who would guard Umuaro when his spirit crossed the great river? Naturally, his eyes turned to his sons. Oh, his sons. They were handsome, broad-shouldered, with arms strong from wrestling and voices deep as talking drums. They wore fine wrappers and strutted proudly through the market square, their shadows long in the afternoon sun. Women whispered at their beauty, and men nodded at their stature. Truly, they were princes in flesh. But Omanuko's heart was not so easily swayed. He began to notice things. Subtle at first, then sharp as thorns. One morning, he rose early and went to the fields. The farmers bent low, hoes rising and falling in rhythm, sweat dripping like rain. But not one of his sons was among them. They still lay sprawled on mats of silk, dreaming away the cool hours. Another day, he summoned them to sit in council. A widow came, weeping, her neighbor having stolen her land. Instead of listening, his sons whispered among themselves about ivory bracelets, about horses from distant traders, about palm wine that had yet to ferment. They argued about who would inherit the throne, each boasting louder than the next. When father dies, I will be king. "I am the firstborn," declared Obis, puffing his chest. "You are weak," sneered the second son, Okena. "When the kingdom needs war, who will lead if not me?" "Both of you are fools," the third son barked. "The people love me best, I will take the stool." Their quarrel stung Omanuko's ears like scorpion bites. That night, he sat by the fire, staring into the flames. His staff felt heavy in his hand. His sons carried his blood, yes. But what of his spirit? He saw arrogance where there should be humility. He saw greed where there should be duty. He saw pride where there should be wisdom. He whispered into the crackling flames, "Children of my blood, yet strangers to my soul." Still, he did not despair entirely. Perhaps it was youth. Perhaps time would carve wisdom into them as the river carves stone. Perhaps. But deep in his heart, a seed of doubt had been planted. And though small, it was growing. Among the many servants in the palace of Omanuko, there was one whom no one truly saw. His name was Obidiya, though most called him simply the slave boy. His origins were murky. Some said he had been captured in war, others whispered that his parents had sold him during a famine. Whatever the truth, Obidiya had grown up in the palace, running errands, pounding yam, sweeping courtyards, carrying heavy loads until his back ached. Where the princes wore coral beads, Obidiya wore only scars, thin white lines across his arms from years of labor. Where they boasted with voices loud as the talking drum, his words were quiet, spoken only when needed. Yet there was something in him the others lacked, a steady fire, silent but unyielding. Obidiya rose before dawn. When the cock crowed, he was already at the stream, filling calabashes with cool water. While others still rubbed sleep from their eyes, he stoked the palace fires, swept the courtyards, and polished the king's stool until it shone like sunlit bronze. When the day was heavy with work, he carried twice his load and never complained. The other servants often mocked him. "See the slave who walks like a mule. Does he think labor will make him a prince? Pooh! He smiles while breaking his back. Who smiles at suffering?" But Obidiya only lowered his head and continued. Sometimes, Omanuko watched from the veranda. He noticed how the boy greeted elders with respect, how he never quarreled with the other servants, how he gave his own portion of food to children when famine struck. He saw how Obidiya's hands, though calloused, were always quick to help, lifting, building, mending. Omanuko said nothing then. But in his heart, he marked these things. One afternoon, when the sun blazed like molten copper, the princes sat beneath the great Udola tree, drinking palm wine and boasting of their strength. Their wrappers were bright, their beads gleamed, their laughter rang loud. Obidiya passed by, carrying a heavy pot of water on his head. Sweat streamed down his face, his bare feet coated in dust. The princes burst into laughter. "Ho! Look at the mule," shouted Obis, the eldest. "Tell me, slave, does the pot not crush your skull?" sneered Okena. "Perhaps he enjoys it," laughed another. "Perhaps he was born to carry weight while we were born to carry crowns." The others roared. But Obidiya only paused, adjusted the pot carefully, and bowed. "May the princes live long," he said softly, then walked on. Their laughter followed him down the path. From the veranda, Omanuko heard it all. His heart grew heavy. His sons, proud as roosters, mocked the very humility they should have embraced. And the slave they despised carried himself with more dignity than they. Not long after, the skies opened in a sudden storm. Rain hammered the roofs, lightning split the heavens, and wind tore branches from trees. The villagers scrambled for shelter, but the palace courtyard filled with chaos. One of the barns collapsed, spilling yams into the floodwaters. Goats bleated, chickens scattered, servants wailed. The princes. They fled indoors, shouting at others to save their belongings. Some clutched their fine clothes, others hid under mats, their beads clattering as they stumbled. But Obidiya. The boy leapt into the storm. He tied ropes to salvage the barn, waded knee-deep into the flood to rescue drowning goats, carried frightened children on his shoulders, stacked yams high on platforms of wood. His body shook with cold, but his will was iron. All night he walked, until the storm broke and dawn returned, pale and wet. When Omanuko walked out that morning, he saw his sons still asleep, their wrappers soaked and muddied. But in the courtyard, he saw Obidiya, mud clinging to his arms, eyelids heavy with exhaustion, yet still standing guard over the rescued goods, making sure nothing was lost. The king's heart stirred. He called the boy to him. "Obidiya," Omanuko said, "why did you not sleep like the others?" The boy bowed low. "My king, how could I rest when your people's food was drowning? If the barns are empty, what shall the children eat? If the goats die, who will provide meat at the feast? I am but a slave, but the burden of the land rests on all who dwell in it." Omanuko stared long, then nodded slowly. A slave who thinks of the land before himself is worth more than a prince who thinks only of his beats. The words were quiet, but Obidiya heard them. He lowered his head, hiding the fire in his eyes. From that day, the king watched closer. When disputes arose in the courtyard, Omanuko noticed how Obidiya calmed quarrels with words gentle but firm. When food was scarce, he saw how the boy gave his share to the youngest. When strangers arrived, it was Obidiya who greeted them, finding mats for them to sit on before any elder even stirred. The people began to notice too. At the stream, women whispered, "Have you seen the slave boy? His heart is cleaner than the river." In the market, men said, "He works harder than 10 servants and asks for nothing." Even children sang, "Obidiya, strong as yam root, kind as palm wine." The princes scowled at these whispers. They mocked him louder, beat him sometimes, sent him on impossible errands. But Obidiya never answered with anger. He endured, silent as stone, steady as the Iroko. And in Omanuko's heart, the seed of doubt about his sons grew into a tree. Perhaps blood alone was not enough. Perhaps true kinship lay not in birthright, but in spirit. The rains had passed, leaving the land green and full again. Harvest time came, and the air smelled of roasted yam, ripe palm fruit, and wood smoke. The people of Nigeria were prepared for the great festival of the New Yam, the celebration where the king would bless the crops, where drums would thunder, and where the kingdom would display its wealth before the gods. But in the palace of Omanuko, peace was far away. Late at night, when the moon was round and white as a calabash, Omanuko sat awake on his stool, staring into the courtyard. His children slept within their chambers, their snores rising and falling like restless drums. But the king's heart was restless too. The storm had changed him. He could not forget the image of his sons hiding under mats while Obidiya braved the flood. He could not forget how his princes boasted of crowns, yet never lifted a hand when danger came. He remembered too the laughter under the udala tree, when they mocked the boy who carried water. The words of his ancestors returned to him, "A king's eyes must see beyond blood. For the throne is not a father's gift, but the land's burden." Omanuko clenched his staff. "But how can I?" he muttered to himself. "How can I place a slave above my own blood? The elders will curse me. The land may rise against me. My children will call me mad. Yet, if I give the crown to them, will the kingdom not suffer?" Thus doubt gnawed at his heart like termites eating the base of a mighty Iroko. Days later, the king gathered his sons. "Children of my loins," he said, "the yam festival approaches. Show me what kind of men you are. Go into the town. Speak to the people. Share their burdens. Let them see that the blood of Omanuko runs with strength and wisdom." The princes bowed, their coral beads clattering. But when they went out, they behaved like cocks loosed into a farm. Instead of helping, they strutted, shouting orders, demanding palm wine and meat, and mocking those who walked. Obis, The eldest even struck a farmer who refused to abandon his hoe to fan him. When news of this reached Omanuko, his chest tightened with shame. He called his sons before him. Is this the way of princes? To demand wine from a thirsty farmer? To strike a man whose hands feed the land? But Obis raised his chin. Father, we are princes. Shall we lower ourselves to slaves? The people exist to serve us. When the throne is ours, they will bow anyway. The king's jaw hardened, but he said nothing. He dismissed them with a wave of his hand. Yet inside, his doubt sharpened into a blade. And what of Obidiya? That same week, while the princes boasted and quarreled, Omanuko walked through the market in disguise, his wrapper plain, his staff hidden. He wanted to hear the whispers of the people without them knowing. There he saw Obidiya again, not as a slave but as something greater. The boy was helping an old woman gather spilled peppers from the dust. He was repairing a broken stall for a blind man. He was laughing with children, teaching them how to carve toy boats from palm fronds. He spoke little, but his presence was steady, drawing people to him like moths to a flame. The market women whispered, "Oh, that boy has a heart softer than yam in soup. If only the princes had even half his kindness. Sometimes I think the gods sent him as a sign." Omanuko stood still, his chest heavy with both pride and sorrow. He returned to the palace silently, each step echoing with the truth he could no longer deny. That night, Omanuko dreamed. In his sleep, he walked into the great forest, where the trees whispered like elders in council. There, beneath the moonlight, stood the shades of his forefathers. Their eyes glowed like fireflies, their voices deep as drums. "Omanuko," they said, "why do you tremble?" He fell to his knees. "Ancestors, my heart is torn. My sons are princes by blood, but their hearts are shallow. There is one among us, a slave, whose spirit is strong. But how can I place him above my own children? Will not the people curse me? Will not the gods strike me?" The spirit thundered, "A king does not serve his children. He serves the land. Better a crown upon the head of a slave with wisdom than upon the head of a prince with folly. For the throne is not a birthright, it is a burden. And the land itself will choose who must carry it." When Omanuko woke, sweat poured from his body. He clutched his staff with trembling hands. The decision was forming, though fear still clung to him. Days later, the yam festival approached. Omanuko summoned his council of elders. The great men of the land gathered, their beards white, their walking sticks carved with totems of power. They sat in a circle, kola nuts before them, the air thick with anticipation. "My fathers," Omanuko began, his voice heavy, "the time comes to name my heir. But my heart is not at peace." The elders murmured. "What troubles you, Omanuko?" He sighed. "My sons are princes in name, but not in spirit. They mock the weak, despise labor, and live only for themselves. Yet there is one in this palace, not of my blood, whom I have seen bear burdens greater than kings. Tell me, fathers, must the throne always pass by blood alone?" The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Some frowned, others stroked their beards. One said, "The land respects lineage. To give the crown to a stranger is to uproot tradition." Another shook his head. "But is not the land greater than tradition? If the princes are unworthy, then blood alone will not save us." The debate raged deep into the night. Voices rose, kola nuts cracked, staff struck the ground. Some elders cursed the thought of a slave on the stool, others whispered that perhaps the gods were moving through Omanuko's doubt. At last, silence fell. All eyes turned to the king. The final word was his. Omanuko's hands tightened on his staff. His heart pounded like the festival drum. "Let the yam festival come," he said at last. "Before the people, before the gods, I shall decide." And with that, the council broke, the air heavy with dread. The yam festival dawned with the rising of the red sun, its light spilling like palm oil across the sky. From the hills and rivers, from farms and forests, the people of Nikilionwu poured into the king's square. Drums throbbed, flutes sang, and masquerades with painted masks danced in wild, spinning circles. Everywhere, laughter rang out, but beneath the joy was expectation, for everyone knew this would not be an ordinary festival. Whispers had carried across the land, the king will name his heir. Inside the palace, the princes dressed in their finest. Coral beads hung heavy on their necks, wrappers of red and white silk tied around their waists. Each looked at the other with suspicion, for each desired the stool, yet none trusted his brothers. Obis, the eldest, preened before a polished brass mirror. It will be mine. I am the firstborn. It is my right. But his younger brother, Chike, spat. Father has grown weak. If he denies you, he denies us all. The stool belongs to our blood. Yet even as they argued, none of them thought of the people, nor of the burdens that came with the throne. Omanuko, meanwhile, sat quietly in his chamber. His staff of authority leaned against the wall. Before him, a small calabash of palm wine remained untouched. His mind swelled with the voices of the ancestors, the faces of his sons, and the memory of the boy who had braved the storm. When the royal attendants came to summon him to the square, they found him gazing into the distance, his eyes heavy with sorrow and resolve. "It is time, king," they said. Omanuko rose slowly, his frame still strong though age pressed on his shoulders. He picked up the staff, its carved head gleaming, and walked out to face his people. The square was filled to the edges. Men, women, children, even travelers from distant villages, all pressed close to witness the moment. Drummers struck the air with a rhythm that seemed to shake the earth. The elders sat in a circle, their faces grave. The chiefs lined up in colorful attire. The masquerades froze in their steps, waiting. When Omanuko appeared, silence swept through the crowd like harmattan wind. He climbed the raised platform at the center of the square and stood tall, staff in hand. "My people," he thundered, his voice echoing across the hush. "Today we honor the yam, the king of crops. But today we also honor the future, for it is time to name who shall sit upon this stool when my shadow fades." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Children clutched their mothers. Men leaned forward. Women held their breath. "Let my sons come forward," Omanuko commanded. The princes marched into the square, their silks shimmering, their beads clinking. They bowed before their father, each standing tall with pride. Omanuko looked at them, his face unreadable. "You are my blood, the sons of my loins. Yet before I speak, I ask you this, why should the land bow to you? What will you give to your people?" Obi stepped forward first. His chin jutted out. "Because I am firstborn, father. Tradition gives me the right. The people will serve me, as they served you. That is enough." Murmurs of disapproval stirred among the crowd. Chikia followed. "I am the strongest. With me, no enemy will dare challenge Nikilionwu. Fear will keep our land safe." Another prince declared, "I will bring wealth. I will gather tribute from all corners until our treasury overflows." But not one spoke of the people's burdens. Not one spoke of justice, mercy, or wisdom. Omanuko's face darkened. He raised his staff and struck the ground. The sound cracked like thunder. "Is this all you offer? Pride, fear, and greed?" The princes fell silent, their confidence faltering under the weight of his voice. Then Omanuko lifted his staff again. "Obidiya, son of no name, come forward." Gasps swept through the crowd. Heads turned. From the edge of the square, where the slaves and servants stood, a young man stepped hesitantly into the light. His wrapper was plain, his hands rough from labor. But his back was straight, and his eyes steady. He knelt before the king. "My master." Omanuko's voice softened. Tell us, Obidiya, if the stool were yours, what would you give to the land? The boy's eyes lifted, and for the first time, his voice rang out clear. I have no bloodline to claim. I have no wealth to boast of. But I have hands to walk, eyes to see, and ears to hear. If the stool were mine, I would be a servant to the land. I would carry its burdens as I have carried water, and I would guard its people as I guarded your son in the storm. The square fell into a silence so deep that even the birds seemed to pause in flight. The words hung heavy in the air, simple yet sharp as a spear. The elders shifted uneasily. Some frowned. Others nodded slowly. And among the people, a murmur began, perhaps the gods have spoken. At last, Omanuko raised his staff high. His voice shook with power. By blood, the stool belongs to my sons. But by spirit, it belongs to the one who carries the land upon his shoulders. I will not give the crown to pride, nor to greed, nor to fear. I give it to wisdom. I give it to strength of heart. I give it to Obidiya. The words struck the air like lightning. The people gasped. Some cheered. Some wailed. The princes shouted in outrage, their faces twisted with fury. You shame us, father. Obis roared. You curse our blood, another cried. But Omanuko's staff struck the ground once more, silencing them. Enough. The throne is not a father's gift. It is the land's burden. And the land itself has chosen. The high priest stepped forward, his body painted with chalk, his voice deep as a drum. He lifted a calabash of palm wine, poured libation to the ancestors, and declared, Let it be known, the gods have witnessed. The spirits of the land have heard. From this day, Obidiya is heir to Naikiliongu. The crowd erupted, some in jubilation, some in anger, but all in awe. Obidiya trembled as the staff of authority was placed into his hands. The weight of it bent his shoulders, but he did not falter. He bowed deeply, not to the king, but to the people. My life is yours, he whispered. And the drums thundered again, louder than before, as though the very earth approved. The throne room of Enara was silent after the king's words. His declaration rang like a war gong in the ears of his children. The chiefs bowed, unsure, while the courtiers murmured in shock. A king could choose his heir, yes. But never had one chosen a slave over his own blood. Prince Obis, the eldest, clenched his jaw until his teeth ground. He had always imagined the crown resting on his head, his father's staff of office in his hand. He was the first son, the natural choice. Yet here he stood, stripped of his right, humiliated before the court. His eyes burned with hatred as he stared at Akena. Prince Kolechi, the second son, shook his head slowly, his voice bitter. Father, you mock us. The ancestors gave you sons, yet you trample on their heads and lift a slave in their place. This is not kingship, it is madness. The courtiers gasped, for no one spoke so boldly to the Lion King. But the king only sighed, his eyes heavy with age. The crown belongs not to the eldest, nor the strongest, nor the loudest, he said. It belongs to the one whose heart beats for the people. I have chosen. Let the gods bear witness. Obidiya, who had been kneeling all this time, lowered his forehead to the ground. His chest heaved, his heart torn between joy and terror. To be king. Him, once a nameless boy sold into chains. He wanted to protest, to beg release from the burden. But something in the king's eyes told him this was not choice, but destiny. That night, while the village buzzed with whispers, the princes gathered in secret beneath the great Iroko tree. Torches flickered, casting their faces into sharp shadows. Obi spoke first, his voice thick with fury. Brothers, we have been spat upon. That slave boy has stolen what is ours. Shall we fold our arms and watch? Kolechi slammed his palm against the earth. Never. The throne belongs to blood, not to dirt picked from the slave markets. Even the youngest, Chidubem, usually quiet, nodded grimly. Father has lost his mind. If the gods will not correct him, then we must. They clasped hands, their oath dark and binding. Ikena will never sit on the throne. If blood must flow, so be it. The people of Enara were divided. In the marketplace, women selling yams shook their heads. A slave as king. Is this how the world ends? But others, remembering Obidiya's courage during the storm, defended him. Better a slave with a just heart than a prince who thinks only of himself. The griots, the praise singers, hesitated. Which name should they weave into their songs? The rightful princess, or the chosen heir? The air was thick with uncertainty, and rumors flew like bats at dusk. The princes wasted no time. They bribed guards with cowries, sent secret messengers to rival kingdoms, and even consulted a dark Dibia, a sorcerer known for sacrifices that stank of blood. One night, Obis crept into the slave quarters where Obidiya still chose to sleep despite his new status. He hovered over him, dagger in hand. The moonlight glinted on the blade as he raised it, but then, something strange happened. Ikena stirred and opened his eyes, calm as water. If my death will bring you peace, brother, then strike. But know this, killing me will not give you the heart of a king. Obis froze. His hand shook. For a moment, his fury battled with shame. Finally, he cursed under his breath and fled into the night, the dagger clattering uselessly behind him. But the oath was not broken. As the days passed, the king's health faltered. He called Obidiya to his side. "My son," he said softly, though his voice still carried the weight of command. "Do not think the path of kingship is easy. Your brothers will hate you. The people will test you. Even the gods may doubt you. But if you hold fast to truth, you will endure." Tears stung Obidiya's eyes. "My king, I do not deserve this honor. I am only what chains once made me." The king smiled faintly. "Chains may bind the body, but never the spirit. Remember, the crown bows only to the one who serves." That night, the Lion King breathed his last. The palace wailed, drums beat the dirge, and the people gathered for the funeral rites. On the third day after the burial, the elders prepared the sacred stool. The throne of Enara could not remain empty, the gods demanded continuity. The princes stood tall, their faces masks of controlled rage. Obidiya stood apart, his head bowed, still clad in the simple cloth of his youth. The high priest raised his staff. "By the will of the ancestors, by the voice of the late king, the next is Enara shall be." Before he could finish, a scream split the crowd. Torches fell, people scattered. Warriors rushed forward as Obis and his brothers stormed the square, swords drawn. "This coronation is a lie," Obis roared. "Blood, not slave filth, claims the throne." Chaos erupted. The villagers gasped, caught between fear and awe. Would blood spill in the sacred square? Just as steel was about to clash, the earth trembled. The sacred drums began to beat on their own, though no hand touched them. From the shrine of the ancestors rose a mist that called like serpents. Out of it stepped ghostly figures, the spirits of kings long gone, their eyes glowing with fire. The princes dropped their swords in terror. One spirit, taller than the rest, raised its hand. Its voice boomed like thunder. The late king spoke true. The throne is not won by birth, nor stolen by envy. It is given by the ancestors to the one who carries the people in his heart. The spirits turned, pointing at Ikena. "He is the chosen. Harm him, and you defy us." The ground shook again, and the torches reignited. The people fell on their faces, crying out in fear and worship. Obis and his brothers, pale as ash, fled into the forest, never to return to Enara. When the air calmed, the high priest lifted the crown of beads and placed it on Obidiya's head. The sacred staff was given into his hand. The crowd rose as one, their voices thundering. Long live Eze Obidiya, the king who was once a slave. Obidiya's eyes filled with tears, but he stood tall. His first words as king were not of power, but of service. I am no master. I am your servant. If I rise, it is only to lift you with me. If I rule, it is only to protect you. May the gods bear me witness. The drums thundered, women orated, and children danced. For the first time in history, a slave sat on the throne of NRI, not by force, not by blood, but by the will of the ancestors. And thus the tale spread across all of Igbo land, the king who chose a slave over his own children, and the kingdom that found justice in humility.